Hello, and welcome to Metamorphic Sight Productions, where we show the truth and beauty of the gospel through the art of film. I am your host, Hannah, and today I'm trying something new. So a long time ago, I made a video essay. Usually when I make video essays, I don't film myself. I just do audio. And then I show the clips from the movies and I use them as examples to explain my thesis or whatever. Like 2 years ago, might be longer than that. I made here I'm going to put it this video that was about The Exorcist, and that video got organically 4,000 views, which isn't a lot, but when something like that happens without promotion, you push into it. So I've been having this idea for a while to do a new series on my channel where I talk about horror films. I like horror films. I watch a lot of them. And that's surprising to people once they also know that I'm a Christian. Usually those two things don't go together, but that's the beauty of YouTube video essays is we find things you would never think would go together and you smash them together and then you get something you can listen to while you're doing your laundry. But in all seriousness, I think that horror films deal with a part of the human experience that a lot of other films don't even dare to delve into. Horror films ask the question, what scares us? And from there, you can ask the question, why? And from that answer of why does this scare us or why is this horrific, there's a lot of actual good truth to be taken from that and learned from. And so we're going to be doing that in this new series called Coffee, Jesus, and Horror. I have my coffee, Faith Over Fear mug, and then I'm wearing my Ghostface shirt. In my cup today is a nice brew of Lavazza. So near our home where we live, near the beach, is a really lovely cafe. It's a really lovely cafe. They have the best sandwiches. Oh my gosh, the breakfast and lunch sandwiches and paninis. But all of their coffee, by the way, the latte's beautiful. They use Lavazza, and we love it. We love the taste of Lavazza, and we happen to find it at Home Goods. I think you could probably find it many other places, but yes, that's what we have in our cup today is a nice hot cup brew of a hot cup of Joe of Lavazza coffee. Not sponsored. Actually, we're going to get to the whole thing with sponsorship in a minute. Not sponsored at all. No, on my life, not sponsored. And some honey, some great value honey, just mixed in there. If you've never had honey and coffee, you are missing out. It is amazing. It is like one of the best like flavor combinations. The Savannah Bee Company, once again not sponsored, they have this wonderful honey roasted like coffee. Like the coffee is like roasted with honey. Also a very beautiful blend there. But yeah, that's what's in my cup today with my coffee. And now the horror movie we're going to be talking about today is Ari Aster's Hereditary. I know, what a choice for this first one. I've been wanting to do a video about Hereditary for a long time, ever since I saw the movie. It really speaks to me personally, and I know that it's going to confuse a lot of you, but I will explain. Ari Aster is a master. Ari Aster is a master. He makes his films in a way that heightens horrors and things that disturb us and scare us that are everyday experiences. And then he like heightens it in his films. And when we experience it in this heightened form, it gives more clarity or maybe better reflection into the everyday normal thing that people go through. But before we get into that, I'm actually going to throw it over to Yesterday Hannah, and she's going to talk to you about ministry and support raising. Why, hello. It's a different day. Movie magic. So I'm here to tell you about how I'm not like other YouTubers. And that's because I'm actually in ministry before I'm a YouTuber. So I made a video about this a long time ago. Maybe I can put it like right here. I think it's like the first video you see if you go to my channel that explains my ministry and what I do and who I do it with. I am a department under Artists in Christian Testimony International. They've been absolutely wonderful to me. They give me a home for my ministry. So if you're wondering, Christian ministry, what are you talking about? Hannah, what is this? Basically what I do is I use my artistic talents to, educate about film and film theory and how that can relate to our faith. And then I also try to make film that glorifies God. And I do that to serve my fellow man, but also the church, the big C church, like everyone in Christendom. So the reason why I picked ministry in the way that I'm doing this is because it makes what I'm doing very, very accessible to everyone. I don't have to make paywalls for what I create. I don't have a studio or a producer to answer to. I don't have like a brand to answer to. I can freely make my content and my films and then make them accessible for everyone, which is very, very important to me. But your girl still needs to eat and help support my family, which consists of my husband and our 3 cats at this point, but could consist of more in the future. So I seek people who want to support me to do my ministry work. You are kind of like, now don't get this confused. It would be very similar to a traditional patron, but I know there's Patreon. I don't have a Patreon, but that's where that word comes from. But the reason why I would be seeking, I call them my supporters, or my M.S.P family. But the reason why I would be seeking supporters is so that they would see like, oh, I love that Hannah has the freedom to talk about God freely and talk about her religion and spread the beauty and the truth of the gospel through film, which is our mission statement. They love that. They want to support that. They want to see that. And so they say, I can make that possible by going to her Giving Fuel page and signing up for like $1 to $5 a month. That's kind of the general ask that I'm asking from everyone who views my stuff and really likes it. Sometimes people want to be more generous and give more, and that is completely welcome. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down actually my needs and my budget. I want to make sure that I am being as honest as I can and explain kind of my fund goals that will allow me to do what I'm doing, but not sweat. I've made this chart that I hope helps explain what I'm talking about. If you're visual like me, you can see it all broken down here. It's all needs based. My goal is $3,000 a month. What I mean by that is once I reach $3,000 a month, I will cut it off. I'll be like, that's it. That's what I need. I'm not going to support raise anymore. I'll basically say, hey, the time for becoming a supporter is over, unless supporters, drop off or needs change in the future. But if the needs change in the future, a nice update will be made explaining all of that. So as we see here in this lovely visual aid, 1/3 of that $3,000 will go directly into buying supplies and equipment, anything that's needed for M.S.P. I have some wonderful supporters already that have allowed me to start buying building material from my stop motion animated film, The Perfect Mirror, and allowed me to buy this very nice and sparkly new ring light. I actually feel legitimate. Do you see the little circles in my eyes? That's how you know it's real. See the circles in the eyes that make you look like you're an alien or something? So that would be just directly into ministry funds. But the other thing that is needed for ministry is me. I and my family need to eat. So there is allotment for that for a month would be about $350. That would actually, what I would plan to do is take over the food budget in the house if I were to reach my goal. So my husband could save more money in the future for maybe a baby. But so our budget would be $350 a month for groceries. That wouldn't include extras that you would see at the very bottom here. Income minus expenses, that would be like a little extra money left over if we didn't want to cook one night. We would get, DoorDash, or we'd maybe go out on a date or something. But yeah, groceries have gotten exponentially more expensive. The next thing that's really needed is gas. This would be, once again, I would aim to take over this in our household. We drive all the time, because our church that we love, absolutely, they are our rock. They're an hour away from us. Because of our living situation, we have to live an hour away from our church, and we pretty much make a trip from here where we live an hour away to a different city weekly. So we can be with our church that we take super seriously. We really take the fellowship aspect of our church. Oh, it's one of the most important priorities to us. And so the gas is actually really important so we can continue to be there and to serve in that aspect of our lives. But also it's just a need. a basic need. Everyone needs gas. Everyone needs to budget that in. And I think it would be a really great blessing to my husband to take that off of his plate financially. Then we have student loan payment. That speaks for itself. My phone bill, once again, speaks for itself. I have to pay for unlimited data because I be Googling everything like all the time. Like literally because I have ADHD, if I'm out somewhere and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this, I'm inspired. I need to write this down right now. But no, I need to Google this thing because I need to make sure this, or no, this plan is also happening in my brain. Another very important one is giving. So while I'm being given to, it's so important to give back. And so I want to increase my giving. In the past, I've given to different ministries. I supported Ratio Christi, which was a huge impact in my life in college. I want to go back to supporting them. I support another ACT member, me and my husband do currently. And also I just want to be more active in giving and helping in my local community to spread God's love and the way that we're called to take care of, the widows, the orphans, those who are hungry. So to dedicate more money that we can and hopefully increase the amount that my husband and I together are giving. We just think that is just very important, especially if you are in ministry, you always need to be giving. And then the savings, that's probably one of the biggest things. Is it the biggest thing? Yeah, other than the ministry expenses, it's the biggest thing. It's very important because we would really love to maybe own a house someday in the future and also have a child, more than one. And so that's just a really big thing in our life, is to save as much money as we can. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to take over the groceries and the gas and stuff so my husband could save even more money because, big plans for the future. So that's the breakdown of what I would be asking for, or what if I were to meet my monthly goal, where it would all go to. But I don't have any other job than this. As of right now, I'm full-time. If you're full-time, you need to be fully supported. If you're not, you need to be working towards it. So here we are. Hi. Today's sponsor is you. If you would like to become a supporter of mine, I really do not do it until you have watched at least 3 to 5 of my videos and have come to the conclusion that you're like, I like what she's doing and I want to support her. I think the lowest amount you can give is $1. And then if I got 3,000 subscribers, which is a pretty low bar for YouTube, and they all gave $1, I would meet my goal. And then I would just be like, oh, K-Love pledge drive over. I would just be like, we're good until maybe things happen, maybe needs change in the future, or maybe there's a big project or something. And then I would get back on the little stool here and be like, hey, new breakdown. But yeah, I'm trying to look into the lens, but I'm also trying to look over here to where I'm that's where I see myself. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I'm looking good, right? But then I'm like, actually, I'm looking into your eyes. And also, I'm still new to this. I work behind the scenes mostly, and I'm really this year putting myself out there, out in the front, just talking to everyone. And so I'm sorry if this was a garbled mess. I'm going to try to make these better, but basically you'll be seeing these videos again in the little space or normally where Wendigoon will be like, guys, I have something I have to confess to you. I've been playing Rage Shadow Legend, but I don't do that. I won't have a sponsor, or I won't have monetization on the ads on my videos. I can't stop ads being on my videos, by the way, but I'm not going to be a part of the YouTube partner program. I'm aiming to have people who want to support me directly be the people who support me. And they do that because of the ministry, because of what I'm doing with M.S.P. Not because of who I am, or if you know me, or if we went to high school together, but because you like what we're doing here and you want to see it to further the kingdom. In every single video I make, in the info bar underneath the video, the little find out more, there's a link to my Giving Field page, and that is how you can sign up to become a supporter. It's linked in this video. It's linked everywhere. I think I might have a link tree connected to my YouTube channel. It should be in there too. So it's Metamorphic Site Productions Giving Fuel. Thanks. Bye. Welcome back. I have to give a disclaimer. So, as you know, horror films are normally not rated G or PG. Usually they start around the PG-13, that level around there. So, know your own limits. If horror films are too scary for you, or if they are containing a subject matter that might be triggering for you, or it's just something you don't think you should be exposing yourself to for whatever reason, spiritually health wise, or, maybe mentally health wise, take absolute no shame in being like, it's not for me. I know a lot of people who they read about horror films or they try to experience them in other ways because actually experiencing it is not their cup of tea. And that's okay. I'm not going to judge anyone, and I'm definitely not going to be like, oh, you should always watch the film. It's film, it's art. You should always appreciate it. There's a famous saying that might not be well liked, but it's art disturbs the comfortable and comforts the disturbed. And sometimes what we can take from that is that what could be beneficial to someone to have a cathartic experience in experiencing a film with certain themes might be acceptable for one person, and for another person, it is not acceptable at all. Just always do your research about a horror film before you watch it to make sure you're not exposing yourself to something that will make you stumble if you're a Christian. And if you're not a Christian, like I said, don't take any shame in being like, I'm just going to protect me for my mental health. But there is value in a lot of horror films, and there are a lot of people who like watching them, who are curious as to why they like being scared or why they like going through this thing called catharsis, which we'll also talk about a little bit, where they have these emotions, deep emotions in a film. A lot of times horror films bring out specific ones that other movies sometimes don't even touch. And then they feel sometimes better after it. The horror film gives them room to contemplate something that they otherwise might really struggle to contemplate and to process. And we're going to get into all that. So that's my disclaimer. If you just won't watch this video and never watch Hereditary because it's too scary or it deals with themes it's too sensitive, I support that. But if you do love Hereditary or horror movies and you want to support the filmmaker, then I also very much support you watching the film, buying it in some way, shape, capacity, either through a streaming service or buying it online or buying it on DVD. You want to support the artists and the art that you want to see more of. And with all of that, we're going to get right into the video. Okay, so section 1, part 1, point 1. What is Hereditary about? Put this up there, editing Hannah. Hereditary is about a woman who, when we first meet her in the film, her mother has passed away and her family is attending the funeral of her mother, and they are all kind of going through this grieving process that is difficult for the main character, who is the daughter, the wife, the main woman here, because she had a very unstable relationship with her mother. And so her mother passing away, she's grieving it, but in the same way, she feels a weird sense of relief. This is the personal part. And so she struggles with this feeling of like, man, me and my mom just didn't get along, and we had all this trauma, in our unresolved trauma in our past, and now she's gone. What do I do? So she starts going to support groups for grieving people, seeking help that way, which is a completely valid way to do that. If you are going through something like grief, you always want to find people who know how to support you. This woman has 2 children. She has one son who's older and a younger girl, and the younger girl is disturbed. We see her being very quiet, very reserved, very in herself. She has a deathly nut allergy, which we find out, which will be important later, and she does really weird stuff, like cut the head off of birds. She does this weird sound also. And then the son, who's older, is kind of a normal teenager, a lot of angst, also has a weird vibe, and both kids have weird vibes in relationship with their mother, who is the main character. Seeing a trend here. She is a miniaturist. I don't know if that's how you say it. She makes very highly detailed miniatures, and that's like her art that she does. And she has a gallery that she's getting ready for. She has like a show, and she's trying to finish that, but she's going through losing her mother and having all that happen, and just weird stuff starts happening around her house. Things start happening with her daughter. Someone desecrated her mother's grave, and Toni Collette, I can't remember the character's name. Was it Annie? It was Annie. Annie's not finding help in her grief. One night, the eldest son gets invited to a standard house party where there's going to be like booze and weed. And I don't know I do know what possesses her. We're going to talk about that. It'll get revealed in a second. But the mother's like, take your younger sister with you. And Peter's like, fine, I will, even though why would she want to be there? They go to the party. Peter's trying to do his own thing. He's trying to talk this girl he likes, and Charlie doesn't know what to do because she's around all these people that are not her age. He's like, oh, there's some cake. Go eat some cake. Cake was cut with a knife or had tree nuts in it. She has a deadly tree nut allergy. So Peter takes her. She's going into anaphylactic shock. They're rushing. He's trying to get her to the hospital. They're driving as fast as he can. Charlie sticks her head out the window trying to get some air because she's choking. And there's a dead deer randomly in the road. Peter swerves to miss it, and because of that, Charlie's head collides with a telephone pole on the side of the road, decapitating her. Peter is so shell-shocked by this that he just drives home, goes to bed with his sister's headless body in the car, and doesn't say anything. He just is in bed. He's so shaken by what has happened, he can't say anything. And then the next scene, which is one of the best and worst at the same time scenes of the whole movie, is just him in bed laying there, hearing his mother get up, talk to her husband, go out into the car to see that her daughter's body is there, and she just wails in grief. And Toni Collette's acting is like top notch in this scene. It's one of the hardest watches. But now we've had 2 deaths, one of a character we don't really know, another of a character we've kind of known. After this, Peter and Annie's relationship pretty much crumbles, and you could understand why. Like, Annie feels like Peter, I think in her subconscious, like in her dark part of her heart, she feeds the idea that he was to blame for this. Annie is greatly tempted to blame her son for everything. Like, she has so much bitterness and anger from this circumstance in her situation that she does not want to be in anymore. She does not want to be without her child. Peter is racked with guilt because he thinks he killed his sister and that it was his fault. And this just causes them to further break apart. Communication disintegrates and the family starts to disintegrate with it. At this time, in that support group that Annie was going to, there is this older woman. She comes to Annie and is like, oh, I'm trying to connect with you. I'm trying to help you. Like, I understand that you're going through such a hard time right now. I lost my son. She says all this stuff. And eventually this woman convinces Annie to come over to her house to perform a seance. Don't ever do that. Do not talk to the dead. Bible tip for today. But she does it anyway because she's so desperate. And the woman is able to convince her that she's talking to the ghost of her dead son. And so she teaches her how to do this ritual where she's going to talk to Charlie, her daughter, from beyond the grave. So Annie brings all the stuff home. They do the seance and it is semi-successful. Freaks Peter out. After all of that happens, once again, didn't help any of the situation. The object that Annie used in the seance was Charlie's old sketchbook, and she starts to see in the sketchbook creepy drawings that might show that for some reason, whatever is happening spiritually is targeting Peter. Back at Peter's school, while he's just living his life, first of all, old lady friend shows up, starts talking to him, and he has this moment where he slams his head on a desk without his control over his own body. And so now we're like, oh, something is targeting the son. Why? Annie does some more research about her mom and finds out that her mom was actually in a satanic cult. Great. And in her pictures that she had, her personal belongings, there's pictures of the old lady friend, the seance woman. Great. And that they worshipped a demon that specifically wanted a male host. And it seems that the male host needed to come from the bloodline of the leader, who was Annie's mother. Earlier in the film, we heard a story from Annie saying that at some point, her mother tried to do something with her brother, or that's what her brother claimed, and that her brother ended up committing suicide because he couldn't handle whatever was going on. We now know it was this. But then the other thing that's revealed is that Charlie, when she was born, the demon went into her, but he doesn't like a female host. And so it really messed up Charlie her whole life. Well, that would mess up anyone. But it was it hated being in her body. And so this cult has constructed all of these things to happen, including the death of Charlie, to finally get Peter to be the one that is the host. Annie discovers all this. She sees the sketchbook, I believe. She thinks that somehow this is tied to everything. Her husband comes home. He thinks she's going crazy. She's like, no, I have to burn this. I have to get rid of it because if I do, then everything will be fixed. That's what's in her mind. She tried to destroy it once before and then it like set her on fire. And so she's like, oh, I can't do that. I don't want to die. But now she's like, I am willing to die. I will just throw it in the fire and I'll die. And he's like, you're insane. She throws it in the fire and he goes up in flames. That is a crazy moment in this movie. And she's so in shock by what has happened. And she's just like, what? And then she gets possessed. And this is probably the scariest part of the movie. Now that Annie's possessed, Peter is asleep in the house. She starts to follow him all throughout this house after he wakes up, and basically is trying to lead him to Charlie's old treehouse. This is also one of the craziest parts of the movie. It's probably the scene that most people remember, is when he wakes up and she's on the ceiling behind him and she's like flying and floating around. And it all accumulates to where Annie beheads herself, a very traumatic moment, and then is literally carried by the spirit up into the treehouse. Peter is scared to death of these coven members who are in his house. He's so freaked out by everything he's just seen that he runs out of a window and he falls to the ground. There's a theory that I think it means he died at that point, like he left his body and so now he's like an open vessel. I have no idea, but he ends up going up into the treehouse. The ritual is completed and the demon gets his host, and that's the end of the film. Whew. So what is this movie really about? All of that just transpired. Well, a lot of it can be broken down and really looked at if you just look at the title of the film, which is Hereditary. It's about family. It's about things that are passed down in families. And so what I think Ari Aster was saying with this film, and the way that he does, where he takes something that is common and heightens it supernaturally or just in a horrific way to have us look at it with fresh eyes, is generational trauma and or generational sin. It's made evident at the end of the film that everything that happened to the family was because of the cult. It wasn't like some random circumstance. It wasn't because of an accident. It wasn't because of coincidence. It was because they were being manipulated by a satanic cult, which has some crazy implications when you think about it theologically or spiritually. Annie is a tragic character in this movie. She does not want to hurt her children the way her mother hurt her, but she's literally trapped. She cannot escape whatever her mother has started. This almost makes it feel like we're watching a movie where the abuser wins, and it's kind of a hard pill to swallow. I think Ari Aster, this is an MO for him, the exact thing I said, where he tries to take something that is more commonly horrific and then like twist it in some way that we really see it as like, oh, like we see it with fresh eyes, even though we should have seen the horror before. When he was a student filmmaker, he made a movie called The Strange Thing About the Johnsons. Big old content warning on that one. It is available to watch online, but it's very disturbing. I'll just put the trigger warnings up there to let you know in the content of the film what it deals with. But what he did was that he took something that is unfortunately a common occurrence and he flipped a major detail around. The person who is normally the perpetrator becomes the victim in that situation. And it makes you look at the situation through new eyes, and really it shakes you out of your coma, I guess. It's like we're all so used to hearing these stories of violence and pain against, the same types of people, like women and children. We sometimes get numb to what is really going on. And so Ari, what he was trying to do was be like, hey, let's never become numb to something this horrific. Let's really feel the pain in there so that we can work to prevent it and stop it. But that theme he took with him and put it into Hereditary. I've not seen Midsommar, but I'm assuming he's probably done it there too. I feel like I should watch Midsommar. If you'd be interested in a video about Midsommar, let me know in the comments down below. The common thing here is generational trauma. Everyone has generational trauma. What has happened to your ancestors affects your line all the way down. And that is spiritually through sin, and sometimes it's even like physically. There's this thing called epigenetics, which is insane, but it's when your ancestor, like your great-grandmother, experiences like a trauma, and that is passed down physically into her daughter, and then that's passed down physically into your mother or your grandmother, and then passed down again. It's like these traits that literally affect us today that happened years and years and years ago to people that we've maybe never met, but like directly affect us. And then there is generational trauma that is very real and present. If you had a narcissistic mother or father, or if you had neglectful parents, or if you had an alcoholic parent, that is something that will affect you for your life. And you have to learn to process that and heal from that in a way that is beneficial to you, that's not going to hold you back. And in this movie, doesn't happen. The abuser wins. And that is like, oh, it was a gut punch when I got to the end. I was like, oh, man, that makes you feel hopeless. But from here, we're going to move on to the second section of this video, which is talking about and explaining generational sin. So generational sin is usually the cause of generational trauma. Now, sometimes you have to be careful about, I guess, the definition of what I'm talking about. But there are two main definitions that I am going to explain. First is original sin. Original sin is the sin Adam committed, Adam and Eve. It is the sin that is passed down to every single human being because of their own sin. It is the sin that started it all in a way, but it's also something that is like in our blood. It runs through us. It corrupts our flesh. Paul specifically writes about it in Romans 5, about how sin entered through one man, and through the sacrifice and obedience of another man, aka Jesus, sin was resolved. Original sin, and all sin, but to keep with the theme. And so that sin is passed down in the flesh through every generation of humans. But then you get specific generational sins, which are things people conscientiously do. This is like becoming drunk one night, and then the next night, and then the next night, and then the next night, and then becoming an alcoholic, and that affecting your role as a spouse and a parent, and that forever affecting your children. And they grow up and maybe they become alcoholics, or maybe they are addicted to rage or something similar, and it just keeps going. Or if we go back to the example of There's Something Strange with the Johnsons, very real, but abuse. You choose to abuse a child. That child grows up and perpetuates that abuse because they were abused, which is a common cycle that we see. Generational sin, well, this is the thing I was talking about with the definition. Generational trauma can even be done from outside of the family. So a sin against a family or against a group of people that results in generational trauma, but is not like originated within that family. So I am Irish.
Okay, I want to talk about Ireland.
Mostly my father's side. And I have a really hard time losing weight. I'm gonna be real personal here. But that is very possible. Remember I was talking about epigenetics? That's very possible. The reason why that it's hard for me to lose weight is because of my Irish heritage, because of the potato famine. Irish people in Ireland were forced to not eat things like the wheat and the oats that they grew. They had to give them to their landlords in England, and they only ate potatoes to live off of. There was some type of mold that grew in all the potatoes one year and caused the potato famine. Therefore, a famine that was imposed on the Irish people, and many of them had to leave and come to America or other countries so that they could survive. And because of that trauma, the physical trauma of going through a famine, of having only rubbish food to eat all the time because you're being oppressed by this government who doesn't care about you at all, that's passed down genetically to the children. And so now my body's like, oh, calories, great. I'm going to take that and keep it forever. Don't know when the next famine's going to happen, but we're going to get you through that famine, girl. That's like a very tangible way of looking at like the effects of sin and how every sin has a ripple effect, and why repentance is so important, and why the seeking of forgiveness is so important. But repentance equally just as important so that the sin doesn't happen, it stops. So, how does this translate into generational trauma? If you are raised by someone who sins against you in whatever way, shape, or form, and you decide, I will not continue that on, I'm going to break the cycle. That takes a lot of work, that takes a lot of effort, but it is possible and it can be done. And it is good for you to do that. You are repenting of the sin. You might be very tempted to commit the same sins your parents committed because that's all you know. And you have to work very hard to learn something new. But people do it every day, and it's important and it's good. But in this movie, literally, it's like, oh, no matter what you do, you will fall into our plot. You can't escape. Like, the grandmother makes this decision to follow this cult and to follow this demon and to want to do his bidding, and literally puts her children in harm's way. She's like, they don't have a choice. I'm going to sacrifice them if it gets me what I want. She tries to do this with her son, which we never meet in the film, but we hear that he ended up self-exiting, I believe. This forever traumatizes Annie, but also they have this weird, she's always had this weird, crazy relationship with her mother because subconsciously she knows something crazy is going on. She doesn't know exactly what, but she's like, she's so controlling. She says different things about how her mother interacted with her. And then when her first son is born, because of the trauma of her brother who accused the grandmother of doing the thing to him that which caused him to self-exit, she's like, I don't want my son around my mother. And this ironically saves her son. She doesn't know that. She feels guilty about not having her son around her mother. She feels like maybe she should forgive her mother. And that's a big conversation to have of like, what are good boundaries? How do we forgive without having someone just continue in their sin? But focusing more on breaking generational trauma. So for a second, she does. She's like, no, she's not going to be near my baby boy, which keeps her from putting in a demon in him, literally. When her daughter's born, she decides, I need to be closer with my mother from some type of societal pressure, or maybe the subconscious real need, like a real legitimate need to be connected and loved by your mother. And that is when her mother puts a demon in her baby. Like, her mother just doesn't care about her or her family or anything. I think they say in the movie the reason why she's doing all this is because the demon promises that she'll be like wealthy in the afterlife, or she'll be like a queen or something. Literally. Like, letting the grandmother get close to her family and letting the cycle of sin continue directly led to the death of Charlie, because the cult was like, well, we got Charlie. We really don't want her though. We need to literally get her out of here so that we can have what we really want, which is Peter. But I'm not trying to blame Annie, because specifically, and this happens so often, she was raised and kind of trained by her mother, but also there's this societal expectation to be close to your family at all costs. Family comes before everything, blood is thicker than water type of sentimentality. It is very, very difficult to untangle yourself from an abusive parent, specifically a parent when you're a very little child, because you literally are taught everything from how you see your parents interact with the world and each other and you. So I'm not trying to blame Annie at all. I'm just saying that this film really makes it feel like you can't get away, you can't escape. It all culminates in Peter's death. I don't know. Did he die at the end of the movie? I'm not sure. But he is the goal, and he is attained by the demon. And all he did was be born and be a regular kid. And he is forced and hedged in and like smashed into this role. And he is forever changed, and I believe forever tormented. And we have to really think about, I guess, what is Ari Aster doing by having the evil win in this situation? Our third section here is the horror of the horror film. This film makes you feel like you are trapped in a never-ending cycle, or at least a crazy like hamster wheel. Or maybe not like a wheel, but like those like crazy contraptions that kids had in the 90s when they had gerbils and they had like all those like tubes that went everywhere and the gerbil would like run around in it. Like, you're in one of those. The cult literally controls everything in this film. They make everything happen. And so that the efforts of the characters who are the victims of this whole thing, they are useless. They do everything in vain. Spiritually, this can resemble like, I want to call it demonic oppression. People call it spiritual warfare. So demonic oppression is different than possession. It's when evil spirits want to control you by influencing you to do things, to, act in rage or fall into despair or cheat or lie or do something into that because they convince you that if you do that, somehow things will be better for you. And then you end up sinning against other people, yourself, and then things just get progressively worse. And they achieve their goal, which is leading you farther away from Christ. Having the film end the way that it does with the grandmother winning, like getting what she wanted after putting her whole family through all of that, fills me with like rage. And I think that was the point, because I think what Ari's trying to do is like, hey, wake up. We shouldn't let generational trauma and generational sin win. We should break those chains or break that cycle, because this can't be how it is. I think that's what Ari Aster wanted. He wanted to induce this feeling of deep injustice. And so that we would ask, why does this feel so horrible? Like, it's a scary movie. Like, of course it's going to end in a scary way, but why does this feel so like down here in the gut? Like, oh, this just sucks. He is trying to bring attention to something that is very, very real, which is how some people manipulate and abuse their children in ways that they don't even fully understand themselves. They teach their children horrible habits and ways of viewing the world. And also they teach them to do things like resent people, hate themselves. Maybe they give their child body image issues, or maybe they put all of their identity in like their child being perfect. They do things that they think are completely normal and okay, but are not. And then that child has to carry the burden of having that. And either they're going to pass it on or they're going to put it down. And it takes a lot to learn to put it down and not pass it on. I think the aspect of the film having the cult being in so much control. So if we go back to Annie being the miniature artist, that's a very specific metaphor. It's a visual metaphor about Annie making these dioramas. She is the person who is literally placing every little thing in this diorama. She is the one who is controlling how the dolls are posed, how the sheets on the little bed are laid, even to the weathering of the asphalt on the road and everything. She's the one who makes all those details happen in this tiny little controlled environment. The dolls in her miniatures have no say in their existence. They just are moved around. That is supposed to be a metaphor for how the cult is literally controlling them like they're dolls in a dollhouse. And I like it, and yet I don't, because the reality is that you do not have to make, like, your decisions are not pre-made for you. It gives this idea that we are somehow a slave to outside forces that are greater than us. And while we have God, who is the ultimate authority over everything, he's two things. He's very respective and respectable of free will. But number two, the comfort in that is that he is ultimately good. It's not like Satan has that type of power. Unlike in this movie. It's almost kind of like a weird think piece of like, what if he did have that type of power over people, where they literally, like, he could control every single event, and that no matter what they did, they would end up in like the same like they would end up exactly where and how he wanted them to. I think if you go into the book of Job, like specifically, Satan tries to do this with Job, and Job doesn't relent. He doesn't give in. Yeah, he loses so much. And yeah, he literally is brought to the point of wanting to not be here anymore. But he doesn't give up on God. Even though he goes through all that, he never loses his ability to choose what to do or how to respond, unlike in this film. And that makes this terrifying, but also rage-inducing. Also makes you really wish to see the good happen in real life, which I think Ari Aster was trying to accomplish. Also, he's like, it's a horror movie. It needs to be scary. So that leads us to the question of, to wrap this section up, of what scares us in this and why does it scare us, and what does that what truth does that lead us to? What scares us in Hereditary is the fear that we will succumb to the overwhelming pressure of the mistakes of those who came before us. That those who sinned against us when we were very little or even before we were born, that their power will reign over us, and that it is impossible for us to get out from that. It will destroy us in the end. Why does this scare us? Because everyone has a longing in their heart for the goodness of God. They might not understand fully what that is. They could be horrendously confused about what is good and what is not good, but they have a longing, a desire to have goodness. I think, every child has a built-in longing and desire to have a healthy and meaningful and righteous relationship with their parents. It's built into every child to want to have a connection there and to feel safe and loved and to be able to grow and have their needs met by their parents and to never be betrayed by their parent. And that relationship between a mother and child, a father and child, is directly related in the Bible to our relationship with God. Those who believe we are called his children. He longs to be our father, your father. He wants to be in that type of position. It's something that he uses as a metaphor for us to understand him all the time. And so, of course, there is a intrinsic understanding within every human that there is something that is right, there's something that is good when it comes to this, and there's something that is not. And so, obviously, in Hereditary, it really goes deep into the what is not good part. Real quick. What is catharsis? Catharsis is defined as the process of releasing and thereby relieving very strong emotion. The ancient Greeks believed catharsis was a way of purging your heart, almost like a giant exhale of things that you are holding in. They used things like plays to process human emotion and human experience. I think that we will find that within this series going through horror films. I hope to achieve that. Section 4, what to learn. So in reality, it's not hopeless like it is for Annie and her whole family. Christ died to give us hope and victory. You can break the cycle. Like I said, people do it every day. And if you are a believer, it is a promise from God that he will help you to not sin, that you can ask him for that. God made it so that the ultimate abusers, the devil and our own sin, don't win in the end. He already won the war. It is okay to reflect on the horror present in Hereditary and to realize that it is a result of sin and that sin is something that causes immense pain and terror and suffering, and we should never take it lightly and that we should see it as something horrific. So this is my first time doing this series. Please bear with me. I don't do well in front of the camera. I haven't gotten my sea legs yet for this. There were so many other things I wanted to talk about with the film, or just film in general. I really just focused on the plot and the themes within that, and not much else in the filmmaking area, like the cinematography or the acting choices or the mise en scène or anything like that. And I apologize, but I'm also just trying to jump in with both feet and finally start this series. So yeah, I hope that this finds the people it needs to find. Hope you have a blessed day. Hope you got your hope you got your laundry done or whatever you were doing. And yeah, that's the end of my video. Bye guys.